The small town of Pennygrove sat nestled against the rolling Appalachian foothills, the kind of place where everyone knew their neighbors and looked out for one another. Tom Hayes had lived there his entire life. Now in his mid-40s with streaks of gray in his dark hair, he served as the town's game warden, a job that suited his love for the outdoors and the community. Fall had arrived in Pennygrove, painting the vast forests in brilliant shades of orange and red. The morning air carried a crisp chill that hinted at the coming winter. Tom sat at his usual table in Molly's diner, sipping his second cup of coffee when Bill Parker slid into the seat across from him. "Morning, Tom," Bill said, worry lines creasing his weathered face. "My beagle went missing last night. Let him out for his evening business, and he never came back. Whistled and called for hours." Tom nodded sympathetically. "That's the third dog this month. The Wilsons lost their terrier last week, and old Mrs. Cooper's spaniel vanished the week before that." "You think it's coyotes?" Bill asked, his voice dropping to a whisper as if speaking their name might summon them. "Maybe," Tom replied, though something about these disappearances didn't sit right with him. Coyotes typically left evidence behind, tufts of fur, signs of struggle. These dogs were simply vanishing without a trace. The bell above the diner door jingled, and conversation hushed as Mayor Thompson entered with his teenage daughter Lily in tow. The girl's eyes were red and puffy from crying, and the mayor looked like he hadn't slept all night. "Morning, folks," the mayor said, his usual booming voice subdued. "I hate to add to the bad news, but Lily's golden retriever, Sunny, disappeared from our fenced backyard last night." A murmur rippled through the diner. Sunny wasn't just any dog. He was practically a town mascot, accompanying Lily to community events and charming everyone with his friendly nature. The fenced yard added another troubling element. Whatever was taking these animals was either incredibly clever or had opposable thumbs. "I've already printed flyers," Lily said, pulling a stack from her backpack. The paper trembled in her hands as she placed them on the counter. "Please, if anyone sees him." Tom walked over and put a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I'll keep an extra sharp eye out during my patrols, Lily. We'll find Sunny." By noon, Tom's office phone wouldn't stop ringing. Concerned pet owners from all corners of Pennygrove called with questions he couldn't answer. Was it safe to let their dogs out? Should cats be kept indoors too? Was something in the woods targeting their beloved animals? "I don't know yet," Tom told each caller honestly, "but I promise I'm looking into it." That evening, as shadows lengthened across town, Tom spread a map of Pennygrove and the surrounding forest on his kitchen table. He marked each location where a dog had vanished with a red X stepping back. He frowned at the pattern forming before his eyes. The disappearances created a rough circle, moving gradually toward the center of town from the outskirts. Whatever was happening wasn't random. It was methodical, planned. As darkness fell completely, Tom packed his thermos and grabbed his heavy-duty flashlight. Sleep would have to wait. He climbed into his truck and headed toward the densest part of the forest, where many of the marks clustered on his map. The woods were different at night. Familiar trails transformed into mysterious passages. Ordinary shadows took on sinister shapes. Tom's flashlight beam cut through the darkness as he walked, stopping occasionally to listen to the night sounds. An owl hooted somewhere above. Leaves rustled as small creatures scurried away from his approaching footsteps. But something was missing. The distant howl of coyotes that typically echoed through these hills. The forest felt unnaturally quiet, as if the wildlife was holding its breath, waiting. Tom paused in a small clearing, the hairs on the back of his neck standing up. He couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Slowly turning in a circle, his light beam swept across the trees surrounding him, catching a brief flash of movement about 50 yards ahead. "Hello," he called out, his voice sounding strangely muffled in the still air. "Is someone there?" No answer came, but Tom was certain now. Whatever mystery threatened Pennygrove's pets was deeper and stranger than anyone in town could imagine. And somehow he knew this was just the beginning. Tom woke before dawn on Saturday, the familiar excitement of hunting day mixing with his growing concern about the missing dogs. He'd been looking forward to this trip for weeks. A chance to clear his head and stock his freezer for winter. But now it felt more like work than leisure. He dressed in layers, thermal underwear beneath his flannel shirt and canvas pants, topped with his father's old hunting jacket, worn but still reliable after 20 years. The morning air bit at his face as he loaded his truck with supplies, his hunting rifle, binoculars, compass, lunch packed by his own hands the night before, and extra water. Just in case, he added his official game warden gear, radio, first aid kit, and the special tags used to mark anything unusual he might encounter. "Going a bit overboard, aren't you?" he muttered to himself, tossing in an extra flashlight. But something in his gut told him this wouldn't be an ordinary hunting trip. The drive to his favorite hunting spot took 40 minutes, the truck's headlights cutting through darkness and early morning fog. He parked at the old fire road's end and continued on foot, moving quietly through terrain he knew by heart. The first hint of sunrise painted the eastern sky in pale pinks and golds, but beneath the thick canopy of trees, shadows still ruled. Tom had been in these woods hundreds of times over the years, fishing in the clear streams during summer, collecting mushrooms in spring, hunting in fall. The forest was like an old friend, with familiar landmarks and sounds that welcomed him home. Except today, that old friend seemed to be giving him the cold shoulder. 2 hours into his hike, Tom realized what was bothering him. The forest was too quiet. No cicadas calling from the branches. No squirrels chattering complaints as he passed beneath their trees. Even the wind seemed reluctant to rustle the remaining leaves. "Something's not right," he whispered, stopping to listen more carefully. His breath made small clouds in the chilly air. In the unusual silence, his heartbeat sounded impossibly loud in his ears. He switched off his planned route, heading deeper into the forest rather than toward the ridge where he normally set up his hunting blind. If there was something strange happening in these woods, he needed to know what it was. The sun climbed higher, burning away morning mist, but doing little to warm the day. Tom checked his watch, nearly noon, and considered turning back. He'd covered almost 8 miles, much farther than he typically ventured on foot, and had seen nothing unusual except for the troubling silence. That's when he heard it. The sound came from somewhere ahead, traveling through the stillness like a pebble dropped in calm water. Not quite a bark, not quite a whimper, but definitely made by a dog. "Hello," Tom called out, then immediately regretted breaking the silence. Whatever was happening here, announcing his presence might not be wise. He moved forward more cautiously now, watching where he placed each foot to avoid snapping twigs or rustling leaves. The terrain began to slope downward, and Tom recognized they were approaching Malone's Ravine, a steep gully that most locals avoided due to its treacherous footing. The sound came again, more distinct this time, definitely a dog, and it sounded distressed. Tom quickened his pace, his hunter's instinct momentarily overshadowed by concern for the animal. He slid down a gentle slope, using saplings to break his descent, and worked his way toward the ravine's edge. The third time he heard the noise, it was joined by others, multiple dogs, their voices overlapping in an eerie chorus of whines and soft barks that seemed deliberately subdued, as if they were afraid of being heard. "Sonny?" Tom called softly, thinking of the mayor's daughter's missing golden retriever. "Here, boy." He reached the ravine's rim and carefully peered over. The ground dropped away sharply, falling nearly 30 feet to a narrow creek bed below. Tom pulled his binoculars from his pack and scanned the area, his hands steady despite his racing heart. What he saw through those lenses made his blood run cold. There, in the shadowy bottom of the ravine, partially hidden by a stand of young pines, were cages, not natural shelters, but man-made pens built from branches and what looked like chicken wire. And inside those makeshift cages, at least 5 dogs huddled together, watching the forest with fearful eyes. What in the world? Tom breathed, lowering his binoculars. He took a single step back from the edge, his mind racing to make sense of what he'd seen, when his boot heel caught on something hard and metallic, something that had no business being in these woods. Tom looked down at what his boot had struck. Half buried in leaves and dirt was a metal handle, attached to what appeared to be a trapdoor cleverly disguised with soil and forest debris. If he hadn't stumbled upon it by pure chance, he would never have noticed it was there. "What on earth?" he muttered, crouching down to brush away more leaves. The sound of the dogs grew more insistent. Tom stood, torn between investigating this strange door and helping the animals. The dogs won out. They were his primary concern, the reason he deviated from his hunting path in the first place. Tom found a narrow deer trail leading down into the ravine and followed it carefully, grabbing onto saplings to steady himself on the steep descent. At the bottom, the air felt notably cooler, with a dampness that clung to his skin. The small creek trickled over smooth stones, its gentle sound almost masking the soft whimpering coming from behind the young pines. As Tom approached the makeshift pens, the dogs grew more agitated. A black and white border collie pressed against the wire, tail wagging hesitantly. Next to it, a brown spaniel, Mrs. Cooper's missing pet, he was sure of it, barked once, sharply. In the largest cage, a golden retriever that could only be Sunny stood up on shaky legs. "Easy there," Tom said softly, holding out his hand for the dogs to sniff. "I'm here to help." He examined the cages carefully. They were surprisingly well constructed, with flexible branches woven between metal wire to create sturdy walls. Each had a simple latch mechanism, not locked, just closed to keep the dogs contained. Someone had even provided water bowls, though they were nearly empty, and scattered bits of kibble suggested feeding had been minimal but present. "Someone's keeping you here," Tom said, his voice hardening with anger. "Not killing you, not hurting you, just keeping you." He unlatched the first cage, and the border collie pressed against his legs, trembling with relief. One by one, Tom freed the other dogs, 5 in total, each one reported missing from Pennygrove over the past month. "Who did this to you?" he asked, though he knew they couldn't answer. The dogs clustered around him, clearly eager to follow him back to civilization, but Tom couldn't leave yet. The metal door on the ravine rim demanded investigation. He pulled out his cell phone and called his deputy, Frank. "Frank, it's Tom. I found the missing dogs," he said when his deputy answered. "All of them?" Frank asked, surprise evident in his voice. "5 of them, including the mayor's retriever. They're alive, just hungry and scared. Someone's been keeping them in homemade pens down in Malone's ravine." Tom kept his voice low, suddenly aware of how exposed he was in the quiet forest. "I need you to come get them. Bring water and some food." After giving Frank detailed directions and arranging a meeting point where his truck was parked, Tom hung up. The dogs watched him expectantly. "I'm going to take a quick look at something, then we're getting you all home," he promised them. Tom climbed back up to the rim, the golden retriever insisting on following while the others waited below. At the top, he returned to the metal handle and began clearing away more dirt and leaves. It was definitely a door, roughly 3 feet square, made of weathered metal that had been painted a mottled green and brown to blend with the forest floor. Years of law enforcement training told Tom to wait for backup, to not enter an unknown situation alone. But curiosity and concern overrode his caution. If there were more animals inside, they needed help now. He gripped the handle and pulled. The door resisted at first, then opened with a groan of rusted hinges. Cool, musty air wafted up from the darkness below. Stone steps disappeared into shadows. The golden retriever whimpered, backing away from the opening. "Yeah, I don't like it either," Tom told the dog. He pulled his flashlight from his belt and clicked it on, shining the beam down the steps. They descended about 15 feet before ending at what appeared to be a narrow tunnel. Tom hesitated at the threshold. Everything about this screamed danger. But he was the game warden. This was his forest, his responsibility. Whatever was going on here affected his town, his community. He needed to know. "Stay," he commanded the dog, who seemed all too happy to obey. Tom took a deep breath, tightened his grip on the flashlight, and began to descend into the darkness, each step taking him further from the natural world he knew and deeper into something entirely unexpected. The stone steps were slick with moisture, forcing Tom to brace one hand against the rough wall as he descended. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing a narrow passageway ahead. The air grew colder with each step, carrying an unpleasant mix of dampness and chemical smells that made his nose wrinkle. "Hello," he called out, his voice bouncing off the walls in hollow echoes. No response came except for a distant drip of water. At the bottom of the stairs, Tom paused to get his bearings. The passage stretched about 30 feet before opening into what appeared to be a larger space. Cables ran along the ceiling, leading to dim LED lights that provided just enough illumination to cast long shadows, but not enough to see clearly. Someone had been maintaining this place, and recently. Tom moved forward cautiously, every sense on high alert. The floor was packed dirt that had been trampled smooth by frequent use. Along the walls, metal shelving units held plastic containers labeled with dates and codes he didn't understand. His flashlight caught something moving in one container, a dark mass shifting slightly, but he forced himself to keep moving rather than investigate. The passage widened into a chamber roughly the size of his living room. Unlike the rough-hewn tunnel, this space had been finished. Concrete floor, walls reinforced with corrugated metal, and a drop ceiling with fluorescent lights, half of which were burned out or flickering. What in the world? Tom whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of machinery. The room was filled with equipment that looked like it belonged in a laboratory, not a hidden bunker beneath the forest. Metal tables lined the walls, topped with microscopes, centrifuges, and computers. Glass-fronted refrigeration units hummed in the corner, their contents hidden behind frosted doors. Most disturbing were the cages, larger and sturdier than those above ground, built for animals bigger than dogs. Tom approached one of the computers and tapped the spacebar. The screen flickered to life, requesting a password. Next to it lay a leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with handwritten notes and diagrams. He flipped through it quickly, struggling to make sense of the scientific jargon, but certain phrases jumped out at him: canine response patterns, territorial adaptation, and accelerated evolution. A large corkboard hung on the far wall, covered with maps and photographs. Tom's heart skipped a beat as he recognized the area. It was Pennygrove and the surrounding forest. Red pins marked locations throughout town, with dates written beneath each one. With growing horror, he realized they corresponded perfectly with every reported pet disappearance. Not just recent ones either. The earliest pins dated back 6 months, suggesting this operation had been running far longer than he'd suspected. Some locations had yellow pins instead of red, with different notations he couldn't decipher. They've been planning this, Tom muttered, a chill running down his spine that had nothing to do with the underground temperature. He pulled out his phone to take pictures of the map and notebook, but found no signal this far underground. Instead, he used the camera function, documenting as much as he could. Whatever was happening here, he needed evidence. A nearby desk held folders filled with printouts, data sheets, charts, and what appeared to be medical records for various animals. One folder was labeled Hybrids and contained photographs that made Tom's stomach turn. The creatures in the images looked like crosses between dogs, wolves, and something else entirely. Their proportions wrong, their features unsettlingly mixed. Against the back wall stood a large glass tank, mercifully empty but lined with forest debris as if to mimic a natural habitat. A clipboard hanging from its side contained daily feeding schedules and behavior notes. Tom was so absorbed in his discoveries that he almost missed the sound, a soft footfall from the passageway behind him. He spun around, flashlight raised, just as the overhead lights suddenly blazed to full brightness, momentarily blinding him. When his vision cleared, a woman stood in the doorway. Her white lab coat was smudged with dirt, and she carried a clipboard tucked under one arm. Tom recognized her immediately. Dr. Lynn Fletcher, the wildlife biologist who'd moved to town earlier that year. The woman who'd volunteered to help search for the missing pets. The woman who'd suggested coyotes were to blame. Mr. Hayes, she said calmly, as if finding the town's game warden in her secret underground lab was a minor inconvenience rather than a catastrophe. I see you found my research facility. I suppose we should talk. Tom's hand instinctively moved toward his hip where his service weapon would normally be, but he'd left it in his truck. This was supposed to be a simple hunting trip, not an investigation. He straightened his back, trying to project more confidence than he felt. Dr. Fletcher, he replied, keeping his voice steady. I think talk is putting it mildly. You've got a lot of explaining to do. The biologist sighed and stepped fully into the room, letting the door swing shut behind her. In the harsh fluorescent light, Tom noticed details he'd missed during their casual encounters in town, the intensity in her eyes, the precision of her movements, the calculating way she assessed him now. I suppose I do, she agreed, setting her clipboard on a nearby counter. Though I was hoping to have more data before this project became public knowledge. Project. Tom gestured around the underground lab. You're kidnapping people's pets and calling it a project. Dr. Fletcher's expression hardened. It's not that simple, Mr. Hayes. What I'm doing here is important, groundbreaking research that could revolutionize our understanding of canine evolution and adaptation. She moved toward one of the computers, typing rapidly to bring up a series of images. For the past 3 years, I've been tracking a new species emerging in this region, a natural hybrid between wolves, coyotes, and domestic dogs. They're incredible creatures, more adaptable than any of their parent species, with enhanced intelligence and social structures unlike anything we've documented. Tom frowned, struggling to connect this information with the caged pets. And this justifies stealing people's dogs. Borrowing, she corrected, as if the distinction mattered. I need to understand how domestic dogs interact with these hybrids, what attracts them, what repels them. The pets were never in any danger. I've been caring for them, documenting their behaviors, and plan to return them once my data collection was complete. You can't just take animals from their homes for your research, Tom said, anger rising in his voice. There are laws, ethics boards, proper channels for scientific studies. Dr. Fletcher laughed without humor. Do you have any idea how long it takes to get approval for this kind of work? Years of paperwork, committees questioning every methodology, funding constantly at risk. Meanwhile, this evolutionary event is happening right now, in these woods. I couldn't wait. She pulled up another image on the screen. A trail camera photo of what looked like a large wolf with unusual coloration and proportions. They're out there, Mr. Hayes. A dozen at least, with their numbers growing. If we don't understand how they interact with domestic animals and humans now, we could face serious problems as their territory expands. Tom studied the image, a chill running through him as he recognized the area where it was taken, less than 2 miles from the elementary school. If these creatures were as intelligent and adaptable as she claimed, you should have come to me, he said finally. As game warden, I could have helped you set up legitimate monitoring stations, gotten permits for your research. Would you have allowed me to use pets as test subjects? She asked pointedly. His silence was answer enough. I thought not, she continued. Yet without understanding the interaction between domesticated dogs and these hybrids, we're missing critical data. The pets were key to my research. Tom glanced at his phone, confirming he'd managed to photograph most of the evidence. Whatever your justification, Dr. Fletcher, you've broken at least a dozen laws. I've already arranged for the dogs to be returned to their owners, and now I need to report this facility to the proper authorities. Dr. Fletcher's expression changed, a calculated look replacing her academic passion. I understand you feel that's your duty, but I'm asking you to consider the bigger picture. This research could help wildlife management across the country, perhaps globally. These hybrids aren't just appearing here. They're being reported in many regions. She took a step closer. What if we worked together? Make this legitimate, as you suggested. You could help me secure proper permits, and I could share everything I've learned about these creatures. The community would benefit from understanding what's living in their backyards. Tom hesitated, caught between his duty to uphold the law and the undeniable value of the research. The scientist was offering a compromise, a way to make things right while preserving the work she'd done. I can't just ignore what you've done, he said finally. But I am willing to listen to your full explanation before I decide what happens next. By Monday morning, the whole town of Pennygrove was buzzing with the news. Tom had returned the dogs to their owners, each reunion more emotional than the last. When the mayor's daughter hugged her golden retriever, tears streaming down her face, Tom had felt a moment of pure certainty that he'd done the right thing. But that certainty faded as he sat in his small office, staring at the evidence spread across his desk. Photos of Dr. Fletcher's lab, pages of notes he copied, and his own written account of what he found. The phone hadn't stopped ringing all morning. Reporters from nearby cities, wildlife officials from the state capital, even a professor from the university who'd heard rumors of Dr. Fletcher's research. You look like you haven't slept in days, said Betty, the department's secretary, as she placed a fresh cup of coffee on his desk. Her motherly concern was written across her face. Everyone's saying you're a hero for finding those dogs. Thanks, Tom said, taking a grateful sip of the coffee. He didn't feel much like a hero. Heroes had clear choices, good versus evil, right versus wrong. What he faced felt murkier. After leaving the underground facility, Tom had contacted the county sheriff rather than making an arrest himself. By the time they'd returned with a warrant, Dr. Fletcher had been calmly organizing her research, not attempting to flee or destroy evidence. She'd surrendered without resistance, maintaining that her work was too important to abandon. "The chief wants to know if you'll be at the town meeting tonight," Betty continued. "Everyone's expecting you to speak about what happened." Tom nodded absently. The town council had called an emergency meeting to address the situation. He knew people wanted answers, wanted reassurance that their pets were safe, wanted someone to blame. But he also knew the story wasn't as simple as a mad scientist stealing beloved pets. That afternoon, his phone rang again. This time it was Dr. Chen from the State University's biology department. "Mr. Hayes," the professor began without preamble, "I've reviewed the preliminary findings from Dr. Fletcher's research that were sent to my office. I have to tell you, her work on these hybrid canines is remarkable. If her observations are accurate, we're witnessing an evolutionary adaptation happening in real time." "She stole people's pets," Tom reminded him. "Yes, her methods were unethical and illegal," Dr. Chen agreed. "But the data itself is valuable. These hybrid creatures appear to be unusually intelligent, with problem-solving abilities beyond what we've observed in wolves or coyotes. They're adapting to human environments in ways that could either pose significant threats or offer unique opportunities for conservation." After hanging up, Tom walked to the window, gazing out at the town square where workers were setting up chairs for the evening meeting. A group of children played with their dogs in the grass, carefree and happy. Their pets were safe now, but what about the creatures in the woods? What if Dr. Fletcher was right about the hybrids expanding their territory? The local newspaper editor had left 3 messages asking for an exclusive interview. National science magazines were calling for details on the research. Animal rights activists were demanding Dr. Fletcher face maximum penalties, while several universities had issued statements supporting the importance of her findings while condemning her methods. Tom felt caught in the middle of forces much larger than their small town. He'd always seen his job as straightforward: protect the wildlife, serve the community, uphold the law. Now those duties seemed to be in conflict. As the sun began to set, Tom gathered his notes for the town meeting. He still wasn't sure what he would say. Should he focus on the crime, pets stolen from loving homes? Or should he address the bigger picture, potentially dangerous hybrid animals living in their woods, and research that might help understand and manage them? Walking toward the town hall, Tom noticed Dr. Fletcher's house was dark, yellow police tape across the front door. She was being held at the county jail pending charges, but her words echoed in his mind. What's more important, punishing one researcher or protecting an entire community? As the crowd gathered inside, their worried faces turned toward him expectantly. Tom took a deep breath and stepped up to the microphone, knowing that whatever he said next would shape not just Dr. Fletcher's fate, but the future of Pennygrove itself. 6 months had passed since that tense town meeting, and Pennygrove had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Spring sunshine warmed Tom's face as he parked his truck outside the newly established Pennygrove Wildlife Research Center, formerly Dr. Fletcher's secret underground lab, now a legitimate scientific facility operating under university oversight. Tom nodded to the security guard as he swiped his access card and headed down the stairs. The once damp, dimly lit corridor was now properly ventilated and well lit. Scientists and research assistants moved purposefully between rooms, carrying equipment and comparing notes. None of them gave Tom a second glance. As the center's official wildlife liaison, his presence was expected. "Morning, Tom," called Dr. Wilson, the head researcher who'd taken over after Dr. Fletcher's departure. "Come to check on our visitors?" Tom followed the older man toward what had once been storage rooms, now converted into spacious observation areas. Through reinforced glass windows, they could observe 3 of the hybrid canines in a specially designed habitat. The creatures moved with uncanny grace, their features a haunting blend of wolf, coyote, and domestic dog. Even after months of study, Tom still found them unsettling, too intelligent to aware. "How are they adapting?" Tom asked, watching as the largest hybrid methodically worked at what appeared to be a complex puzzle box designed to test problem-solving abilities. "Remarkably well," Dr. Wilson replied. Their cognitive tests show intelligence levels rivaling those of great apes in some areas. The DNA analysis came back yesterday. They're stabilizing as a distinct species, not just random hybrids anymore. The road to this point hadn't been easy. That night at the town meeting, Tom had made the hardest speech of his life. He'd acknowledged the community's anger over their stolen pets, but also emphasized the importance of understanding the new predators in their midst. He proposed a compromise, a legitimate research facility, transparent and accountable, where Dr. Fletcher's work could continue under proper supervision. Half the town had been furious, calling him a traitor. The other half had been cautiously supportive, recognizing the potential threat these new animals posed if left unstudied. The mayor had finally broken the deadlock, offering town land for the new center in exchange for state funding and educational programs for local schools. Dr. Fletcher herself had faced consequences, a suspended sentence that allowed her to consult on the research but barred her from leading it. Some thought she'd gotten off too lightly. Others felt she'd been unfairly scapegoated. She now worked remotely from a different state, her expertise still valued despite her methods. We've confirmed packs in 3 neighboring counties, Dr. Wilson continued, pulling up a map on his tablet. Red dots showed confirmed sightings, yellow ones represented possible territories. They're spreading faster than we anticipated. Any attacks on humans? Tom asked the question that still kept him up at night. None, Dr. Wilson said firmly. They actively avoid human contact. But pets are another matter. They seem drawn to domestic dogs, especially ones that wander into the woods alone. This had led to Pinnegrove's most visible change, the Pet Safety Initiative. Every animal in town now wore a microchip and a special tracking collar developed by the research center. A community alert system warned owners when hybrid packs were active nearby. The days of letting pets roam freely were over, but no one complained. Not after seeing the evidence. Tom checked his watch. I should head to the school. I'm giving a talk to the 4th graders about the new safety protocols. As he drove to the elementary school, Tom reflected on how quickly life had adapted to this new reality. The research center had brought jobs and attention to Pinnegrove. The university had established scholarships for local students interested in wildlife biology. Even tourism had increased, with wildlife enthusiasts hoping to glimpse the mysterious hybrids from the safety of newly built observation platforms. At the school, the principal greeted him warmly. The same children who'd once feared for their pets now crowded around Tom, eager to share their hybrid spotting stories and show off their class project, a map tracking sightings around town. Mr. Hayes, called a familiar voice. The mayor's daughter, older now and more serious, approached with a notebook in hand. I was wondering if I could interview you for the school paper. About how you found Sunny and discovered the hybrids. Tom smiled. She turned her traumatic experience into purpose, already talking about becoming a veterinarian someday. Sure thing, he agreed. Do you ever regret it? She asked once they were seated. Some people still say you should have just shut everything down, arrested Dr. Fletcher, and been done with it. Tom considered the question carefully. I regret that pets were taken without permission, he said finally. But I don't regret learning about the hybrids. Knowledge is always better than ignorance, especially when it comes to protecting what we care about. As if to punctuate his point, his phone buzzed with an alert from the tracking system, hybrid activity detected near the Western Ridge. Within moments, similar alerts would reach every pet owner in the affected area. The system worked. Outside the window, Pinnegrove carried on, forever changed but adapting just like the creatures in its woods. Life found a way forward, not by ignoring new challenges, but by facing them head-on, together.